Tonight we're plunging into the fragrant, awkward, and surprisingly portable world of Victorian hygiene, specifically, why high society ladies insisted on dragging foldable bathtubs with them wherever they went. Picture this. You're wrapped in 6 layers of silk and lace, your corset is one wrong breath away from puncturing a rib, and the cobblestones beneath your delicate boots are caked in a lovely combination of horse manure, coal dust, and yesterday's fish. There are no sidewalks, no sanitation trucks, and if you trip, well, let's just say that velvet hem isn't going to smell like roses afterward. Oh, and yes, the smell. You can try not to inhale too deeply, but it's everywhere. London in the 1860s is a full sensory experience, and clean is mostly a dream for the upper classes and a cruel joke for everyone else. And yet, here you are, trying to look elegant while your underarms are conducting a very quiet, very dignified rebellion. This is a time when bathing regularly still earns side eyes from older relatives, but not bathing earns full-on ostracism at garden parties. In short, you can't win. The river smells like death, your maid thinks daily bathing might kill you, and yet your social life, your entire reputation, depends on not stinking. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up the steps of your townhouse, balancing a dainty parasol with one hand and lifting your skirts with the other so you don't trail God knows what across the hall runner. The doorman doesn't flinch, which means you're not the dirtiest lady he's seen today. You're greeted by a waft of boiled cabbage and coal smoke from the parlor, and somewhere upstairs, someone's attempting to tune a pianoforte. The bathtub, by the way, is in the attic. Or possibly the coal cellar. It's too big to fit anywhere convenient, and also too scandalous to leave in plain sight. Why scandalous? Because to bathe is to be naked, and to be naked is, well, no proper lady talks about that. You can discuss embroidery and how to make calves' foot jelly, but say the word bathe and your aunt might faint into her port. Here's the truth of it. In the mid-1800s, most homes, even posh ones, don't have indoor plumbing. That means no running water, no pipes, no drains. Everything has to be hauled in by hand. So, if you want to bathe, you need a tub, several buckets of water, soap, which is a luxury, and a strong-stomached maid willing to help you wash in your underthings and pretend not to notice your elbows. Bathing is a massive production. It takes hours, days, if you count the prep and emotional recovery. And the world around you, not helping. Your street floods every time it rains, bringing with it delightful blends of human and animal waste. Chamber pots are emptied into the gutters, and the night soil men only come around when they feel like it. You've read in the paper that 15,000 people died of cholera last summer, and you're not keen to join them. Yet you must look perfect. Always. Your gloves are white. Your hair is curled. Your perfume, if you're lucky, masks the worst of the body odor. But the truth hovers, unless you take extreme measures, you are very much marinating in your own skin. One mainstream fact, bathing among the upper classes increased dramatically during the Victorian era, but indoor plumbing didn't catch up until much later. The first flushing toilets existed in palaces, but for most city homes, water had to be fetched and heated by hand. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some ladies would rub themselves down with slices of raw cucumber or oranges to smell fresher without taking a full bath. Sponge baths were common, though the sponges used were often reused family relics. Imagine the bacteria party happening there. And yes, historians still argue whether the obsession with moral cleanliness helped or hindered physical health. Some doctors insisted that too much bathing weakened the constitution, especially in women. One physician actually warned against overbathing the spine, which, frankly, sounds like something made up by a damp uncle who didn't want to pay for hot water. You, however, are a modern Victorian lady. You read fashion magazines. You understand that Queen Victoria herself is rumored to bathe once a month, which is practically hedonistic. So you decide to do the unthinkable, bathe more than twice a week. Not only that, you want the freedom to bathe anywhere. Even while traveling. Even while staying with your cousin at their dank Scottish estate that smells like sheep and regret. And so begins your complicated romance with the foldable bathtub. It starts as a whisper at the dressmakers. Have you seen what Lady Dorchester brought back from Paris? They say, eyes wide, fans fluttering. A bathtub that folds into a chair. You blink. That can't be real. Can it? The next day, you're leafing through a fashion catalogue while your maid attempts to repin your hair. There it is. Foldable, transportable, scandalously modern. It's made of canvas stretched over a wooden or wire frame. The whole thing collapses like a camp stool. Some versions have little curtains for privacy. One even promises full discretion for hotel use. You shiver with delight. Your maid groans. That thing will be heavy. It will splash. It will leak. You beam and place your order anyway. 2 weeks later, a delivery arrives. Inside the crate, your very own mobile bathtub. You stroke its sides like a prized puppy. It's brown, it smells faintly of oilcloth and desperation, but it's yours. You test it that very night. In your room. By candlelight. With 4 pitchers of lukewarm water and lavender soap imported from France. You settle in, chin high, modesty towel draped over your knees, and for the first time in months, you feel clean. Is it awkward? Yes. Does the tub make a strange squeaking noise when you shift your weight? Absolutely. Do you care? Not one bit. Because you, darling, have just stepped into modernity, soggy, squeaky, and utterly fabulous. The next morning, you're glowing, or at least, slightly less grey around the edges. Your maid notices the difference. Your mother-in-law pretends not to. But the ladies at your sewing circle definitely do. They sniff the air, subtle jasmine. Perhaps a faint trace of bergamot. It isn't perfume. No, it's something else. You look radiant. Lady Finch murmurs over her embroidery hoop. You demur, sip your tea, and say something about good rest. But inside, you're smug. Because you know the truth. You bathed last night. And not in a chipped ceramic bowl with water left over from someone else's foot soak. You soaked in your very own bathtub. Foldable. Private. Revolutionary. Of course, most people would never admit to such extravagance. There's still a lingering belief that bathing too often could make your skin thin or invite illness. Some women swear by cold water and vigorous toweling, others spritz themselves with eau de cologne and call it a day. But more and more, quietly, aristocratic women are joining your ranks. They're embracing the idea that to be clean is not just healthy, it's fashionable. And just as important, it's strategic. Because let's be honest, society is ruthless. You could survive a scandalous letter, maybe even a wayward glance at a footman, but if someone so much as hints that you have body odor, you're finished. That's the reality of being a woman in the Victorian upper class. Your appearance is your armor, your fragrance your reputation. You are judged on your softness, your freshness, your lack of visible pores or human inconvenience. A man can go unwashed for a week and still command a dinner table. You miss one hair washing and suddenly people are whispering that you're melancholic. So you take your bath. And you plan for more. The foldable bathtub, bless it, becomes your closest companion. Not emotionally, of course, this isn't that kind of story. But practically, absolutely. Your maid, who at first treated the thing like a cursed sarcophagus, begins to accept it. She learns the best way to heat the water without it cooling too fast. She knows how much lemon rind to float for fragrance. She stops grumbling when it's time to dump the water into the alley drain. It becomes routine. Weekly. Then bi-weekly. And then, after an unfortunate dinner party where someone spilled gravy on your lap and your chemise absorbed the scent of roast duck, you break tradition entirely. You bathe 2 nights in a row. The earth doesn't shatter. No one faints. You feel amazing. And that's when the judgment begins. It starts subtly. A neighbor's raised eyebrow. A comment about vanities in a letter from your cousin. Your husband asks if this new bathing habit is necessary. He doesn't mind it, per se, but he worries it's too modern. You thank him for his opinion and promptly ignore it. But then there are the whispers from the older generation. Your great-aunt, a relic from the Georgian era who still uses pomatum in her hair and believes oranges are sinful in winter, corners you in the drawing room. You'll wash your good sense down the drain, dear, she says, tapping her fan with surgical precision. Too much heat. Too much water. It weakens the nerves. You smile sweetly and tell her you'll consider reducing your soaks. You don't mean it. One mainstream historical fact here: by the mid-19th century, public health campaigns had begun linking cleanliness with morality. Cleanliness is next to godliness became a popular slogan. For upper-class women, this was both empowering and limiting. It gave them permission to seek hygiene but judged them harshly if they seemed vain or excessive about it. And of course, there was still the idea that too much self-care, especially of the physical, bodily kind, could distract a woman from her proper duties. Like arranging flowers. Or not dying of boredom. Now, here's your fringe detail of the night. Some wealthier women carried little silver sniffers in their reticules, tiny vials of scented oil or vinegar, which they'd subtly inhale when near unwashed crowds. The term smelling salts wasn't always about fainting. Sometimes, it was just a classy way of surviving the general miasma of 19th century life. Historians still argue whether the push for more frequent bathing was driven more by actual medical discovery or by increasing social pressure to separate the wealthy from the working class. Was it about health? Or about status? Or, as with so many things, both? Either way, for you, it becomes non-negotiable. Bathing is your quiet rebellion. Your sanctuary. You begin choosing guest houses based on how easy it will be to set up the foldable tub. You make excuses to avoid homes with only tin basins. And on one memorable occasion, when visiting your husband's family estate in Kent, you even convince the butler to bring buckets of warmed water twice in one evening. That butler still avoids eye contact. Your friends start to notice. They get curious. One by one, they ask about your traveling washstand. You correct them. It's a foldable bathtub. They pretend not to be impressed. But weeks later, you catch one of them struggling to fit hers into a carriage without wrinkling the velvet. That's the thing about social trends. They sneak. What was once too much becomes quite refined. What was indulgent becomes essential. There's something empowering about it. You begin to take more control over your routine. You find soaps that don't smell like soap. You request camphor and crushed rose petals. You dab a little lavender oil behind your ears, not for anyone else, just for you. Well, mostly. And though the tub still looks like a cross between a sling and a laundry basket, you begin to find it charming. Familiar. Like an inside joke between you and your better self. You even name it. Quietly. When no one's around. Winifred, you whisper, giving it a little pat. You've earned it. You know the world will change. You've heard about houses in Manchester with running water. You've seen blueprints for modern bathrooms with tiled floors and flush toilets. The foldable tub won't last forever. But right now, in this moment, as you soak under a waxy candle glow and your maid hums softly while folding towels, you're not worried about the future. You're clean. You're radiant. You're winning the quiet war of social survival, one bath at a time. You're packing for a weekend visit to your cousin's estate in Yorkshire, and you already know what the most important item is, not your crinolines, not the bonnet with the imported silk ribbons, not even the biscuits you've hidden in your sewing bag for the train ride. No, it's Winifred. Your beloved, your slightly saggy, entirely miraculous foldable bathtub. The trunk has to be adjusted. Again. Because foldable doesn't mean small. It means portable, in the loosest, Victorianist sense of the word. Winifred folds flat, sure, but she's still about the size of a modest steamer trunk and smells faintly of soap, mildew, and triumph. Your maid sighs heavily while wrapping the tub in linen sheets, muttering about city foolishness and country wells being plenty good enough. You ignore her. You've been to your cousin's place. Their idea of a bath involves a chipped iron basin, one shared sponge, and water so hard it's practically crunchy. You arrive 2 days later, your traveling carriage slowed to a crawl by autumn mud and approximately 11 pieces of luggage. The footman frowns as he tries to carry your bathtub upstairs. You smile sweetly and say you're sure they'll manage. Because here's the thing, not all bathtubs are created equal. And the invention of the foldable bathtub? That's nothing short of genius. Let's take a moment to meet the marvel itself. Most models are shaped like deep slings, stretched canvas or oilcloth held taut by metal or wooden frames. When opened, it looks a bit like a lounge chair mated with a trough. There's a basic structure beneath, some have ribs of oak, others wire. The fabric part is waxed to hold water, though not indefinitely. Some leak. Some squeak. Some are so delicate you wouldn't trust them to hold a cup of tea, let alone 2 buckets of warm lavender water. But for all their quirks, they serve their purpose. You unfold. You fill. You soak. You weep quietly at the luxury of not smelling like boiled cabbage and stress. The earliest foldable tubs begin appearing in the 1830s, mostly in French catalogues. Of course the French got there first. They're marketed as Bain's portatifs, with delicate sketches showing women reclining in grace, usually attended by a maid with strong biceps and no privacy boundaries. By the 1850s, English versions are catching on. A few entrepreneurial bathmakers advertise their models as ideal for invalids, traveling wives, and missionary ladies abroad. That last category always raises eyebrows. What exactly are those missionary ladies doing out there that requires so much portable scrubbing? One mainstream fact to soak up here: the late 19th century saw a boom in domestic gadgetry for the traveling elite, including foldable writing desks, portable bidets, and yes, entire collapsible bathing kits. Some even included metal hoops you could suspend a curtain from, to turn any corner of a room into a makeshift washroom. A fun quirky detail? Some upper-class women in Europe took their portable bathtubs camping. Actual Victorian lady camping. That meant servants, tea trays, and starched gowns beside the river, because even in nature, one must be clean. Of course, historians still argue whether these tubs were genuinely useful or just status symbols. After all, if you're traveling with 12 trunks and a staff of 6, is the tub the indulgence, or is it just part of the whole absurd system? Either way, yours is very real. And tonight, in a guest bedroom that smells of damp curtains and dogs, you set it up with ritualistic care. You've already scouted the wash house. There's warm water, sort of. Enough for a shallow soak. Your maid lugs in pails, careful not to splash. You slip behind a folding screen, shed your layers, and finally lower yourself into bliss. It's not perfect. The tub groans under you like a judgmental ghost. One corner dips lower than the other. But it's still yours. The next morning, you overhear the staff whispering about the contraption in your room. One of the footmen thinks it's a musical instrument. The cook assumes it's a cradle. Your cousin doesn't ask questions, she's already plotting to order one. At breakfast, you glow. Your hair is shiny. Your skin no longer smells like someone else's fireplace. You politely decline second helpings of kippa and mention that you're feeling so refreshed. Your cousin squints suspiciously at your cheeks. You know what she's thinking. No one looks that awake after sleeping on a feather mattress that lumpy. Later that week, she corners you in the orangery. Whispers, "Is it true you brought a bathtub?" Like she's asking if you smuggled a political dissident in your valise. You nod. She demands a demonstration. You agree, but only if she brings the biscuits. Within days, her order has been placed. Hers will have blue-striped canvas and brass accents. You're a trendsetter now. Like a bathing Pied Piper. Of course, not everyone joins the cult. Some friends think it's excessive. Others say it's vulgar to talk about water routines. A few swear they'll never give up the sacred sponge-on-a-stick tradition. Still, the tide, no pun intended, is shifting. Because once you've tasted the luxury of control of deciding when and where to clean yourself, on your terms, it's hard to go back. Your bathtub becomes a symbol. Not just of hygiene, but of independence. It lets you escape the stink of shared spaces. It grants you the privacy to care for your body in a way society never really taught you to. It's mobility, wrapped in waxed cloth and stubborn ambition. And yes, sometimes it leaks. Sometimes it collapses mid-soak and dumps half a gallon of lemon water onto your slippers. But isn't that part of the adventure? You return from your cousin's estate triumphant. Tired, yes. Smelling faintly of horse and wood smoke, certainly. But with your chin high and your bathtub under your arm. You, dear listener, are not just traveling. You are traveling clean. You're back in the city now, draped once again in familiar smog, dodging the puddles that are definitely not just rain, and nodding politely to ladies whose petticoats whisper more gossip than their mouths ever could. Your beloved foldable tub, Winifred, has been carefully dried, brushed, and stored beside the hatboxes in your wardrobe. Not in the attic, not in the cellar, inside your actual dressing room now. Because you, my dear, are what society is beginning to call modern. And today, you're heading off for another trip. Not to some unfamiliar manor house, but to a far more perilous location, the countryside estate of a noble family so conservative, they still think lace gloves are scandalous if worn without a shawl. You've been invited to stay a week. The water, you know from bitter experience, is drawn from a well that may or may not have a dead frog in it. The household bath, singular, is a chipped stone monstrosity tucked behind a velvet curtain in the scullery. You once saw a rat walk behind it like he owned the place. You pack Winifred first. This is where your portable tub becomes not just a tool of cleanliness, but a weapon of survival. Because at places like this, bathing is seen as something one does before weddings. Or funerals. Or when Queen Victoria sneezes directly in your direction. Regular hygiene? That's downright French. But you're no longer content to marinate in other people's filth and the ghosts of last Tuesday's pudding. You want hot water, a moment of peace, and skin that doesn't feel like a coal-dusted biscuit. Arriving at the estate, you're met with damp hallways and a host who says, cheerfully, "We've put you in the blue room, mind the ceiling, it leaks on warm nights." You nod, smile, and mentally map out the flattest surface to set up your tub. Later, you unfold it next to the fireplace. The maid raises an eyebrow but says nothing, she's seen worse. You've brought your own lavender oil and wrapped lemon peels in muslin sachets to steep in the water. You lie back into the warm soak and exhale slowly. The faint drip of water from the ceiling provides an oddly calming metronome. Not luxury. Not quite. But enough. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Even among aristocratic households, having a dedicated, plumbed bathroom was extraordinarily rare before the 1880s. Many country estates relied on washstands, foot baths, or sponge baths in front of the fire. Indoor plumbing was viewed by many rural nobles as unnecessary and even suspiciously urban. And a fun fringe fact, some upper-class women took their bathing tubs on fox hunting weekends, stored in the luggage cart behind the horses, insisting on washing off the muck before dinner, even if they just spent the afternoon up to their knees in brambles and flirtation. Historians still argue whether these traveling bathing habits were driven more by genuine concern for health or by a quiet resistance against the constraints of rural customs. After all, the countryside was where old ways lingered. The city might have been dirty, but it also offered ideas. You sense that resistance the moment you rejoin the family for dinner. The hostess, cheeks powdered, nostrils flared like a curious deer, leans across the table. "I do hope the blue room is agreeable," she says, watching you too closely. "You won't find many modern disturbances here." "Oh, quite," you murmur. "The fire's lovely. And I trust you're finding everything adequate for your ablutions." The sentence dangles like a threat. You smile sweetly. "Perfectly so. I do bring a few personal conveniences." She narrows her eyes. "You eat your turnips." Because in places like this, bathing often equals vanity. Vanity equals weakness. And weakness is unforgivable unless you're swooning on a chaise lounge while someone fetches smelling salts and reads poetry. But the irony. The very people who scoff at your modern tub are the ones who will notice, without quite understanding why, that your skin looks smoother. That your perfume clings longer. That you somehow don't seem to carry the scent of dog and damp like the rest of the drawing room. The other ladies don't say anything outright. But one of them lingers in your doorway the next afternoon. Glances at Winifred, half unfolded and airing out by the window. "Where did you get that?" she asks, as if she's trying to remember whether she saw a similar contraption in a crime novel. You give her the name of the Paris catalogue. She nods slowly. Says nothing more. 2 mornings later, you overhear a conversation outside your door. Something about ordering waxed canvas from London. The movement is spreading. You stay for the rest of the week. You bathe twice. Your maid, previously skeptical, begins humming as she prepares the water. She even trims your lemon sachets into little heart shapes, which you pretend not to notice but secretly love. And when it's time to leave, you dry Winifred in front of the fire, fold her gently, and wrap her in linen like a holy relic. On the journey home, you reflect. You used to bring the bathtub because you were anxious. Now you bring it because you're confident. You no longer see it as a burden. You see it as armor. A symbol of your refusal to conform to grime and discomfort. And sure, it's still a little ridiculous. The way the straps squeak when you carry it. The way it flaps awkwardly when you're trying to close it just right. The fact that it takes up more space than your actual evening gowns. But every time you lower yourself into its embrace, feet first, careful not to spill, arms relaxed, you feel the world fall away. You are not a wife. Not a guest. Not a thing to be paraded in silk. You are a woman who knows she deserves to be clean. And really, isn't that the most scandalous thing of all? You arrive at a fashionable hotel in Bath, because of course it's called Bath, and almost immediately regret it. The city itself is charming, Roman ruins, crescent terraces, sulfuric spa waters that promise to cure everything from bad nerves to weak ankles. But your hotel? Less charm, more chamber pots. The wallpaper peels in polite curls. The mattress sighs like it remembers battles. And in your room, neatly placed between a tarnished washstand and a tilted mirror, is your bathing arrangement, a shallow basin with a suspicious brown ring around the inside and a single chipped jug of cold water. You stare at it. It stares back. No, you whisper to the basin. Absolutely not. And so, once again, your maid hauls Winifred out from her linen cocoon. She unfolds the blessed tub with practiced grace and sets it squarely in front of the window, because let's face it, ventilation is key. The hotel staff don't comment, but they notice. You've already become the lady with the contraption. One bellboy nearly tripped over himself trying to peek at it. You're pretty sure the concierge thinks it's for laundering silks. Still, you set up with the same quiet reverence. Water warmed by the portable stove you brought along. Don't ask where it's packed, just know it's heavy, a sprinkle of rosewater, and yes, another lemon sachet. Your maid has grown quite creative with the sachet designs. Tonight's resembles a tiny elephant. As you soak, staring out over the rooftops and half listening to the clatter of hooves below, you wonder how anyone tolerates these public accommodations without some kind of bathing backup. Because let's be real, the public water in hotels is not water. It's regret in liquid form. One mainstream historical fact here: even elite hotels in the Victorian era rarely provided proper bathing facilities. If you were lucky, you'd get a hip bath and some tepid water. If unlucky, you'd be told to wash at the communal basin in the hallway and hope the last guest didn't have ringworm. And it wasn't just the plumbing. There was an entrenched idea that bathing was something done privately, quietly, and rarely. Offering a full bath to a guest was seen as extravagant, even improper. You were expected to make do with a bowl, a sponge, and perhaps a jug of water that had seen better days. So you do what any smart lady would: you bring your own. And your tub, while not glamorous, is reliable. Unlike the plumbing, or the staff, or the suspicious-looking stains on the bed curtains. Now here's your quirky tidbit. Some upper-class women carried portable cork mats to place under their tubs when bathing in hotels. Not for comfort, no, but because they believed that being too close to a cold stone floor would draw the illness downward. Which illness? All of them. Apparently. Historians still argue whether these travel habits were driven by health paranoia or just plain snobbery. Was the fear of communal basins about germs, or was it really about class? Because what's more horrifying to a Victorian lady than the thought of sharing water with someone who earns less than £100 a year? And it wasn't just women who worried. Gentlemen travellers brought their own shaving bowls and water flasks. Children were often kept away from public washrooms entirely. But it was the women, always the women, who were expected to be clean, sweet-smelling, unblemished, and quietly invisible about the whole ordeal. So here you are, in a city literally famous for its historic spas, and the only reason you're not bathing in second-hand foot water is because of Winifred. Foldable, loyal Winifred. You've even developed little rituals. A special fold of the towel. A particular song your maid hums as she pours. A moment of stillness when you dip your face beneath the surface, imagining yourself not in a scratchy hotel room, but a private marble bath beneath chandeliers. Of course, things go wrong. Always. Last night, the tub tipped slightly when the maid stepped on a floorboard knot. You ended up flailing like a startled swan, your hair soaked, your dignity slightly bruised. And just last week, a guest in the next room reported slopping sounds and feminine yelps, which resulted in a very awkward knock from management. You opened the door in your bathrobe and gave them a stare that could strip paint. They apologized. Twice. Because here's the truth: the traveling bathtub is not just about bathing. It's about control. In a world that controls everything else about you, how you dress, speak, marry, and behave, this is your secret rebellion. You decide when to bathe. Where? How? In what scent? You could have settled for the wash basin. You could have sponged yourself miserably while watching the ceiling drip soot onto your hair. But no. You chose more. Even if it means carrying a canvas tub the size of a small goat across the country. And other women are starting to notice. You overhear conversations in hotel parlors. Questions like, did you see what the Countess brought with her? And could you really fold a bath into a trunk? You spot envious glances from women brushing soot off their sleeves. You recognize the hunger behind their polite smiles. They want what you have, not just cleanliness, but autonomy. And slowly, you see them start to bring their own versions. Tin bathtubs. Inflatable cushions. One woman even had a lacquered Japanese folding tub shipped from Yokohama, purely for the aesthetic. There's something almost revolutionary about it. You all still sip tea, nod politely, and wear gloves in public. But privately, you're soaking in warm citrus water, sighing contentedly, and turning the tides of history one bath at a time. So you finish your soak. You dry yourself with the monogrammed towel you packed, because of course you brought your own. You wrap Winifred lovingly, tuck her back into her spot, and prepare for the next stop. The next hotel may be worse. Or maybe it'll surprise you. But either way, you'll be ready. Because you, darling, never travel without a bathtub. Your next adventure takes you on the rails, first class, of course, because you're not about to bounce around on stiff velvet seats next to someone who thinks weekly brushing counts as hygiene. The Great Victorian train journey is an event in itself. You, bundled in travel layers and smelling faintly of rosewater and lemon, step onto the platform like you own it. Your maid struggles behind you with 2 trunks, a hat box, a vanity case, and yes, Winifred, neatly folded and tied with twine like some unusually obedient livestock. The train hisses steam into the air like a dragon with manners. Your fellow passengers glide past, mostly men with stiff collars and distracted eyes, and women who glance at your baggage pile with polite confusion. No one guesses that one of those trunks contains a full-sized bathtub. That's part of the fun. You settle into your compartment. The seats are plush, your window is cleanish, and your tea arrives in a silver pot with a biscuit that tastes suspiciously like mothballs. But the real victory? You've booked the sleeper car. Overnight. Which means, in theory, you could bathe on the train. Is that madness? A little. Are you going to do it anyway? Oh yes. Because if you've ever tried to sleep in a moving box of velvet and brass while feeling sticky, sweaty, and vaguely itchy from hours on a soot-dusted platform, you know that a proper soak is worth everything. The process is, let's say, experimental. The maid eyes the tiny wash closet, then your tub, and raises her eyebrows so hard you think they'll lift clean off her forehead. "It won't fit," she mutters. You reply, "It will." And eventually, with some angling, some bending, and a brief incident involving a dangling corset hook and a lampshade, Winifred sits, somewhat triumphantly, on the floor beside your narrow bunk. The door doesn't close all the way. The train rocks like a gentle earthquake. The water sloshes with attitude. But you do it. Lemon rind water, heated over the compartment's tiny alcohol burner. You sit in the warm, shallow pool, breathing in the scent, listening to the rhythmic clack of the tracks. It's like bathing inside a gently rattling teacup. You almost laugh out loud. But you're too relaxed. Here's your mainstream fact for the journey. By the 1870s, rail travel across Britain was booming. First-class compartments offered relative privacy, sometimes even a small vanity basin. But full bathing facilities? Not even for royalty. You were expected to freshen up with a damp cloth and suffer through the rest. So of course, only the determined and slightly mad brought their own tubs. Here's a fun fringe tidbit. Some well-to-do ladies would bring citrus rinds not just to scent their bathwater, but to rub directly on their skin as a sort of travel scrub. Supposedly, it left a glow. More likely, it left you smelling like marmalade, but fashion is pain. Historians still argue whether this trend of extreme travel hygiene was an extension of class privilege or a proto-feminist rebellion against the rigid constraints of travel etiquette. After all, no one blinked if a man emerged rumpled and tired from a train ride, but a woman? Heaven forbid she look wilted. You emerge from your train bath like a goddess, hair wrapped in linen, skin dewy, your maid eyeing the puddle forming beneath the tub with silent resignation. You drain the water into a basin, carefully, splash by splash. It's not glamorous. It's not efficient. But it's yours. When the train pulls into the station the next morning, you're refreshed. Everyone else is blotchy-eyed and crumpled. You step onto the platform like a debutante at a ball. No one needs to know your secret. But of course, secrets don't last forever. That afternoon, you find yourself in the lounge of your next hotel, sipping tepid tea and reading a society paper. A woman across the room recognizes you. You don't know her name, but you know her type: money, pearls, and a wardrobe chosen by someone who reads French. She leans over. You're the one who bathed on the 9:15 out of Paddington, aren't you? You blink. Pardon? My cousin saw your maid hauling a tub down the sleeper corridor. She said it made a sort of squealing noise. You pause. Sip your tea. It's a very determined tub. She stares. Then laughs. Not mockery. Amusement. Envy. Curiosity. You must show me how it works. And just like that, another convert joins the fold. That evening, you walk her through the setup. She gasps at the lemon sachets. She demands the name of your canvas supplier. She watches, wide-eyed, as the water steams. Her own maid hovers behind her, horrified. You shrug. Cleanliness is a choice. She soaks. She sighs. She sends a note later that night. Thank you. I haven't felt like myself in weeks. That's what they don't tell you. It's not just about bathing. It's about returning to yourself. Amid the chaos of travel, the noise of carriages, the grime of train stations, and the exhausting necessity of being charming at every moment, there's this pause. A warm, wet pause. You close your eyes and think, ah, there I am. Even your maid begins to understand. She no longer scowls while setting up Winifred. She fluffs your towels. She experiments with peppermint oils and rose petals. One night, you let her try the bath herself. Just once. She emerges pink-cheeked, smiling, eyes bright. Doesn't say a word. But next morning, she asks if you'll need the water extra warm. Because she knows now. You travel a lot these days. Sometimes for social calls, sometimes for business, your husband's, technically, though you manage most of the meetings because you have all your teeth and a brain. Everywhere you go, Winifred comes with you. You get better at it. Faster. You learn the best rooms to request, the best spots to place the tub, the ideal number of lemon peels for maximum freshness without attracting bees. Your bath routine becomes as efficient as your packing. And still, every time, it feels like a small luxury stolen back from the world. A gentle defiance. A rebellion that smells like citrus and quiet dignity. You're back in London, perched elegantly in a velvet chair that is far too stiff to be relaxing but just plush enough to signal wealth. Around you, the ladies' club is buzzing, not loudly, of course, because everyone is far too refined for actual noise, but with the kind of polite murmuring that practically begs for gossip. Tea is being poured, gloves are being slowly peeled off, and somewhere near the fireplace, someone is laughing too hard at something that almost certainly wasn't funny. Your parasol rests by your side. Your gloves are pristine. But your real ace in the social deck tonight? That unmistakable post-bath glow. You've just come from an afternoon soak. Winifred has never looked more triumphant, set up in your club's guest quarters with more pomp than a royal christening. And already, your scent is working the room. Not perfume, exactly. No, this is subtler. It's warm lavender steeped in camphor. A hint of rosewater. A touch of sandalwood you picked up from that curious little shop near the docks. It clings to your skin like confidence. The other ladies notice. Oh, they notice. You look frightfully refreshed, says one duchess, who always sounds vaguely offended by your existence. Oh, just a quick rinse, you reply, fluttering your fan. I do find that a short bath clears the mind. Gasps. Whispers. A bath. On a weekday. And now, the dam has broken. They all want to talk about it. Bathing, that is. Not explicitly, because that would be crass. But in coded language, innuendo, and raised eyebrows over saucers of lukewarm Earl Grey. Lady Hawthorne leans over and confesses that she's been experimenting with warm milk in the tub. The Cleopatra method, she calls it, as if invoking royalty will make it less odd. Of course, it smells like breakfast. But the skin, darling. Like velvet. Mrs. Langdon shares her newest indulgence, a splash of perfumed vinegar in her bathwater. Supposed to cure headaches and other pressures. The way she says pressures, everyone nods solemnly as if they all know exactly which pressure she means. You sip your tea. Say nothing. But inside, you're giddy. Because this is no longer a quiet personal ritual. It's a movement. One mainstream historical fact glides in here. Victorian ladies' clubs, which flourished in the late 19th century, were often hubs for social experimentation. While men's clubs focused on cigars and politics, women's clubs allowed space for discreet discussions about health, hygiene, beauty, and even proto-feminist ideas, though never named as such. And your bath stories? They're becoming the hottest topic in town. You share tales of setting up the tub in country houses, trains, even a borrowed garden shed once, when an innkeeper tried to offer you a sponge and called it deluxe amenities. That story earns a gasp and an immediate toast. I would die if I had to sponge again, moans Lady Esterly. My maid keeps pushing lavender towels at me. But the satisfaction just isn't the same. Then the club's newest member, a sharp-eyed young widow with a scandalous streak, offers a suggestion so bold it nearly causes a teacup to shatter in slow motion. Have any of you tried floating? No water touching the skin. Just oils. You lie back and let them coat you. There's a beat of silence. You break it. That sounds slippery. The room erupts. Quirky fact of the night. Some Victorian women truly believed that certain bath additives could influence personality. Rose for tranquility, mint for clarity, jasmine for romantic luck. There were even guides, tiny handwritten pamphlets passed between friends offering emotional bath recipes. You saw one once. It called for goose feathers and molasses. You did not try it. Historians still argue whether these bathing rituals in ladies' clubs and private homes were early expressions of bodily autonomy or simply well-perfumed conformity. Were women creating space for themselves? Or was it just another race to keep up appearances? But sitting here, the air thick with steam, perfume, and half-whispered secrets, it feels like the former. These conversations are quiet revolutions. You're not just talking about soap and skin, you're talking about ownership. Of your time. Your comfort. Your right to feel good, even if you have to haul 20 pounds of canvas and copper across the country to do it. And the rituals. They're spreading. Lady Hawthorne now travels with her own bath sachets, hand-stitched with embroidered initials. Mrs. Langdon has begun importing tiny bottles of lemon oil from Italy. That scandalous widow. She's rumored to be writing a bathing guide, privately printed, of course, and for ladies only. And you've become the unofficial high priestess of hygiene. People consult you. They ask your opinion on bath stool brands, water temperature preferences, how best to soften limescale stains. Someone even suggested naming a model of travel tub after you. You politely declined. But you did suggest rose piping on the edges. It's all so wonderfully ridiculous. And yet, meaningful. Because here, in this room of silk and whispers, you're witnessing something quietly radical. Women carving out pleasure and cleanliness in a world that demands they be effortless and invisible. You're not just folding up canvas and soap, you're unfolding agency, one bubble at a time. A maid arrives to refresh the teapots. She pauses at your chair, lowers her voice. "Begging your pardon, miss," she says, "but where do you keep it when you're not traveling?" You smile. "In the wardrobe. Top shelf. With the things no one's supposed to know I enjoy." She blinks, then nods, with the smallest curve of a smile. And you wonder how many others, watching quietly from the edge of polite society, dream of clean skin and hot water. How many wait for someone else to fold open the future? You take another sip of tea. Because you already know, tomorrow, someone will ask where to order one. And the day after that, someone else will arrive with her own version, smaller, shinier, maybe with velvet accents. And you'll welcome them all. The revolution, after all, has a very nice bathrobe. You're packing again, because of course you are. The world never stops moving, and neither do you. This time, it's a seaside estate on the southern coast, the kind where the gulls cry like someone's dropped their tea and the wind smells of brine and possibility. You're invited for a restful week, which loosely translates to long walks, endless socializing, and being polite to a woman who once called your handwriting robust. Your maid, now a seasoned professional, folds your garments with methodical grace. Gloves, parasol, hat pins, and then, the most crucial item. Winifred. She gets placed last. Like a crown atop a carefully built tower. Only now, Winifred isn't alone. You've expanded. Innovated. You now travel with a small satchel of bath enhancements, a mix of muslin sachets, carved soap petals, and a mysterious blue powder you picked up from a French woman who claimed it banishes fatigue from the bones. It smells like violets and probably contains mercury. You shrug and pack it anyway. Arrival at the estate is exactly as tedious as expected. Too many introductions, not enough chairs. The hostess greets you in that breathless way that implies she's been hosting for decades and has forgotten why. You smile. Nod. Wait patiently for someone to bring you to your room. And the moment you're alone, you unpack the tub. There's a ritual to it now. Like assembling a sacred artifact. Canvas, frame, towel layer, sachets. Your maid lights a small stove for heating water and sets up the corner of the room like a spa, if spas came with uneven floors and a curious draft. You sink in, late that evening, after a long day of gritted teeth and cucumber sandwiches. The wind outside rustles the shutters. Somewhere, waves crash like distant applause. This, you think, is the real vacation. Mainstream fact for this part of your journey: Victorian seaside travel became wildly popular in the late 19th century, driven by the belief that sea air was restorative. Doctors prescribed it liberally, along with cold sea baths and bracing walks. People flocked to places like Brighton and Margate for health and status, and bathing in sea water, either outdoors or in indoor bathing machines, was all the rage. But let's be honest. You're not here for cold salt water that makes your skin prickle and your corset feel like chainmail. You're here for hot lemon and lavender, thank you very much. Still, you can't quite escape the coastal rituals. The hostess insists on a group C dip the next morning. You go, of course, because saying no would spark a minor scandal. You ride a bathing machine into the water, essentially a tiny shack on wheels dragged by a horse. Modesty, preserved. You dunk. You shriek. You emerge feeling like a damp biscuit. That night, you reward yourself with a real bath. You add a pinch of that violet powder. It fizzes. Smells like luxury and poor choices. You lie back, steam rising in little curls around your ears, and you can feel the salt lifting from your skin. You hum quietly, off-key, something you heard a street fiddler play months ago. Halfway through, you hear a knock. Apologies, comes the hostess's voice, but I heard the most delightful scent coming from this hallway. Is that jasmine? You pause. Consider lying. But instead, you say, it's a bath additive. French. Possibly poisonous. There's a beat of silence. Fascinating, she replies. The next day, she asks for a sachet. The day after that, another guest confesses she's been bringing her own soap since 1872. It becomes the newest topic of conversation, between chess games, over breakfast, and during the awkward lull between supper and parlor songs. You've unintentionally started a trend, again. Here's a delightful fringe tidbit. Some women used to bathe with floating flower heads, not just for scent, but so they could send secret signals to others. A red camellia meant passion. A white rose, sympathy. A floating marigold might mean I wish I were somewhere else entirely. Essentially, it was Victorian mood lighting, floral edition. Historians still argue whether these private bathing customs were really as common as the journals suggest, or if later romantic retellings have inflated the elegance and intimacy of it all. Were most women actually enjoying lush, candlelit soaks? Or just rubbing their ankles with a damp cloth in a drafty corner? In your case, it's real. And it's evolving. On your final day at the estate, a quiet older guest, someone's aunt, possibly imported from Wales, approaches you at breakfast. She's soft-spoken, wears mauve, and smells faintly of gingerbread. I hear you travel with a bath, she says. You nod. I once knew a woman who brought a copper tub on a camel. You pause mid-bite. A camel? She swore the desert air made her skin dry. So she made her maid haul water from the oasis every night. You blink. Did it help? The old woman smiles. She died very hydrated. You both laugh softly. No one else at the table understands. That night, in your final soak before departure, you find yourself wondering about that woman. Desert air. Oasis baths. A life spent traveling not for spectacle, but for sanity. For softness. For the return to self, no matter the place or the climate. Maybe, someday, someone will remember you that way. The lady who always brought her bathtub. It's not the legacy you imagined when you were a girl, scribbling poetry in the margins of etiquette books. But now, it seems almost poetic. And besides, Winifred doesn't complain. You dry off. Step into your robe. Look out over the sea from the window of your temporary room. The gulls cry. The wind lifts your hair. And in that moment, you feel untouchable. Clean skin. Clear mind. Tiny violet high. You're ready for whatever's next. You're traveling again, surprise, and this time it's not for leisure or coastal rest. No, you've been summoned. A wedding, deep in the countryside, where the air smells like cow and someone's always holding a tray of unseasoned root vegetables. The bride is a second cousin thrice removed, or maybe fourth. The family tree got a bit gnarled after the scandal with the marmalade factory. Regardless, it's the kind of invitation you can't refuse. The kind that carries unspoken expectations about lace gloves and long-winded toasts. You pack with less enthusiasm than usual, but with more precision. Because this time, you're not just bringing Winifred for yourself. You've received requests. It started as a whisper, then a note, then a full-on letter sealed in violet wax. Please bring your bath. I'll pay for the hot water. Yours in desperation, M. Apparently, your reputation precedes you. So now you're the traveling bath oracle. You and Winifred arrive by coach, greeted by a flurry of relatives you don't recognize and a butler who looks like he hasn't blinked since 1850. The estate is grand, yes, but aging. You can almost hear the wallpaper peeling behind the velvet drapes. Your room is large but suspiciously cold, and you notice immediately, no bath. Not even a basin with pretensions. Winifred sighs in her canvas, sensing the burden she's about to bear. Later that evening, during what's generously called supper, you find yourself cornered by the aforementioned M, a childhood friend turned nervous wreck. Her skin is pale in that stressed-out sort of way, and she clutches your wrist like someone holding onto a life raft made of lavender soap. "I haven't had a proper bath in a month," she whispers. "There's mildew in the basin. Something moved when I lifted the towel." You nod solemnly. We begin at dawn. Mainstream history, right on cue. Many large country estates in the Victorian era still lacked proper plumbing well into the late 1800s. Despite the grandeur, indoor plumbing was expensive to retrofit, and servants often had to haul water by hand for hours to fill even a shallow tub. A bath was a serious undertaking, often requiring multiple people and great discretion. You, however, have turned it into a performance art. At sunrise, your maid builds a fire. The water starts to heat. You unfold Winifred like a magician's trick, layering towels, arranging the sachets. Word spreads faster than a scandal at Ascot. By mid-morning, there's a list. Yes, a literal sign-up list. 7 ladies, 3 chaperones, and 1 very determined governess who claims it's for educational purposes. Each arrives, one by one, and steps behind the folding screen. You provide the rules. No rush. No talking unless you're in the mood. Choose a scent from the pouch: calming, invigorating, or mystery floral. They all pick mystery floral. After each bath, they emerge glowing. Dazed. Hushed, like they've seen something sacred. Some cry. One insists she saw God. It might have been the steam. Quirky tidbit you've picked up over the years. Some women in rural households used bath swaps. They would trade bath time access in exchange for goods: an extra egg, a hair ribbon, even a discreet slice of butter. It wasn't common, but it did happen. Hygiene as barter system. Think of it as protospa socialism. Your cousin, yes, the bride, visits you the night before her wedding. She's stiff. Formal. Still wearing the pin curls. "I heard about the bath," she says quietly. You offer her the final slot. She's in there for nearly an hour. When she emerges, cheeks pink, curls loosened, she says only, "You saved me." And then, "Do you think if I bathe enough, I'll be a better wife?" You pause. That question hits differently. It's not about soap. Not really. Bathing won't change who you are, you say gently, but it will remind you that you have a body. That you deserve to feel good in it. She nods. Doesn't say anything else. The next day, her veil shimmers in the sunlight and her smile feels less forced. Historians still argue whether women in the Victorian countryside had more bodily autonomy than their urban counterparts, or whether they were simply isolated and forced to carve out freedoms in the quiet corners between chores. Did bathing empower them? Or was it just a momentary escape? You don't know. Not entirely. But you do know this. After the ceremony, 3 different women approach you asking where to buy a foldable tub. One wants to bring it to Scotland. Another to India. And then, a younger girl, 12, maybe 13, tugs at your sleeve. "When I'm grown," she says shyly, "I want to have a bath like yours." You bend down. Smile. You will. And you won't wait for permission. That night, after the cake is gone and the wine has vanished and someone's uncle is loudly trying to sing, you're back in your room. Steam curls from the water like soft arms reaching up to hold you. The night wind murmurs at the window. Winifred creaks under your weight. You sink in slowly, carefully, as if the day might crack if you rush it. And as your skin warms and your bones begin to float, you wonder how many other women are soaking somewhere too. Quiet, defiant, clean. You fall asleep in the tub, just briefly, and dream of traveling wagons filled with rose-scented steam. You wake to birdsong and a faint crick in your neck, the tax one pays for falling asleep in a warm bath. Your maid tuts quietly as she helps you out, wrapping you in towels with the practiced grace of someone who's seen you at your most prune-like. Winifred, ever loyal, is drained and folded by breakfast. And just like that, you're off again. This next journey is different. You're not headed to a wedding, or a coastal retreat, or even one of those peculiar restorative house parties full of people who mistake awkward silence for sophistication. No, this time you've been hired. Yes, hired. You, dear bather, are officially a bath consultant. It began with a letter, florid handwriting, 3 different ink colors, and far too much punctuation. A noble woman, of the slightly eccentric variety, is determined to bring foldable bathing to her remote manor. Not just for herself, mind you, but for an entire circle of friends. She's hosting a wellness weekend. Naturally, she wants guidance from the expert. That's you now. No pressure. You arrive to find chaos and floral wallpaper in mortal combat. The manor is large, drafty, and suspiciously damp-smelling in the northeast wing. The lady of the house, a formidable presence wrapped in silk and dramatic eyeshadow, even in daylight, greets you with a single word, teach. You're given a group of 6 women ages ranging from should be in school to once attended Queen Victoria's coronation. Some are curious. Some are skeptical. One has brought a sketchpad. And so, you begin. Mainstream historical fact. The Victorian era saw the rise of the health movement among upper-class women, leading to a growing interest in self-care, cleanliness, and personal autonomy. While these ideas were often still filtered through the lens of patriarchal norms, cleanliness equals moral virtue, it nonetheless created room for women to explore wellness on their own terms, even if it meant carrying a bathtub in their luggage. Your class begins with a dramatic unfolding of Winifred. "Ooh," gasps the youngest. "Mph," says the oldest. You walk them through every detail: the canvas, the collapsible frame, the towel layering, the scented sachets. You demonstrate water temperature by elbow dip. You distribute a modest bath menu: mint for invigoration, rose for romance, sandalwood for resetting the soul. They are enthralled. By afternoon, everyone has bathed. Twice. You've created 6 monsters. The skeptical one asks where to find her own tub. The sketchpad lady drafts a design with little wheels. The eldest participant claims her joints haven't felt this relaxed in 20 years, and the youngest starts a journal titled Steam and Secrets. You're a mentor now. A traveling tub prophet. Which brings us to a fringe tidbit. There were actually a few Victorian spa schools, mostly informal, where women taught each other rituals involving steam tents, herbal rubs, and primitive hydrotherapy. Some were hosted in parlors, others in converted greenhouses. Most didn't last long, but some were whispered about with almost cultish devotion. You're not founding a cult. Probably. But one of the women does ask if you'll consider franchising. That night, as you recline in your personal bath, refilled with rosemary and a pinch of clove, you stare at the cracked plaster ceiling and realize something strange. You're not just surviving this era. You're shaping it. Historians still argue whether female-centered domestic rituals like bathing gave women genuine agency or simply distracted them from the structural limitations they faced. After all, you can soak in herbs and still be denied the right to vote. But those same rituals created pockets of power, of resistance, a quiet reshaping of what it meant to take up space, and to do so without apology. You think about this as you float, ankles barely breaking the surface. Then one of your pupils knocks at the door. "Sorry to disturb," she whispers. "But do you have any more of the mint?" You hand it over, still dripping. She bows like you've handed her a royal decree. You hear the others cackling down the hallway, and the hostess clapping joyfully as a trail of steam seeps beneath her own door. They're bathing. They're glowing. They're soft and strong at the same time. It's not a cult. It's a movement. With nice towels. By the time you leave the manor, Winifred is almost reverently packed. The ladies insist on saying goodbye personally. The youngest gives you a drawing of yourself holding a bubble wand like a sword. You laugh and promise to return if they remember to refill the coal box next time. As the coach pulls away, you peer out the window. 6 women wave from the drive, damp-haired and relaxed, as though they've been let in on a secret they'll never know. You settle into your seat, hands warm, feet still tingling from your last soak. Winifred rests beside you like a faithful knight. You may not wear a crown, but you've started something, one bath at a time. You're tired. Not just stayed up too late reading scandalous serials tired, but travel-worn, soul-deep weary. Winifred is packed, your maid is nursing a bruised toe from an ill-placed chamber pot, and the English countryside has grown predictable. So, naturally, you head for India. It's 1882. You've accepted an invitation to visit an old-school friend now married to a tea merchant stationed near Calcutta. She's promised gardens full of jasmine, mangoes the size of teapots, and, most temptingly, privacy. She also promised modern conveniences, but that turns out to be a loose interpretation of a pipe that sometimes produces lukewarm water. So, yes, Winifred joins the journey. Now, let's pause. You're already sweating in your travel corset, perched on a creaky steamer with a slow leak in your trunk. Your hair is pinned up in a battle formation, and your gloves are damp. Every gentleman on board claims he's very experienced with the climate and proceeds to faint on day 3. And you unfold Winifred. Because if you're going to survive the tropics in full Victorian attire, you're going to do it soaked in rosewater and smug satisfaction. Mainstream historical fact incoming. During the height of the British Empire, upper-class British women often travelled or were relocated with their husbands to colonial outposts like India, Egypt, and Ceylon. Life abroad was marked by discomfort, unfamiliar customs, and in many cases, deep culture shock. But one thing these women clung to: hygiene. Rituals from home. Portable comforts like china tea sets, hair irons, and yes, foldable bathtubs. Your friend's estate is lovely, sprawling, and woefully understaffed. The walls echo with heat. Fans swish lazily above high ceilings. You arrive, and before you've even had a sip of your welcome cordial, she blurts out, "Do you still have the bath?" Of course you do. She's already prepared a shaded alcove for it. Bamboo screens. Scented petals. A servant boy with a brass jug of hot water standing by. This is how empire relaxes. You soak, eyes closed, half listening to parrots screeching from the garden. Your skin breathes for the first time in weeks. You forget, momentarily, that your ankles are swelling and that your shoes smell like mold and colonial guilt. But not everyone is pleased. By the 3rd day, your friend's husband pulls you aside. He's red-faced and awkward, like a man about to ask if you've been leaving hairpins in the sugar bowl. "We've heard from some locals," he mumbles, "that the servants are confused by your bathing." You blink. "Confused how?" He fumbles. "They say they've never seen a woman sit in hot water for so long. And so often. They think it might be spiritual." You grin. You don't correct him. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some parts of British colonized India, there were indeed reports of European women's bathing habits being mistaken for ritual acts, particularly because locals often associated daily full-body bathing with religious practice, especially in rivers or sacred spaces. So a woman sitting in silence behind screens, surrounded by incense and flower petals? It didn't exactly scream practical hygiene. You lean into the mystery. Soon, the local staff starts referring to you as the water priestess. You don't mind. Your baths now come with extra petals and a reverent hush. You even catch a gardener leaving herbs beside your tub one evening, as an offering. Historians still argue whether British women abroad were agents of soft power or merely exiles clinging to routines. Some say their insistence on familiar luxuries fueled cultural divides. Others argue it provided subtle bridges, rituals that made locals curious, even if they mocked them behind the linen lines. You prefer to think of yourself as an ambassador of leisure. You teach your friend's maid how to fold the tub. Show her how to add lemon peel without bruising the rind. One afternoon, a curious neighbor visits. She's the wife of a Scottish officer stationed upriver. She brings homemade soap and 3 unanswered questions about pH balance. By the end of the week, 5 women have visited. 2 have copied your design into their sketchbooks. 1 brought a calico cushion to float on. They all soak. They all sigh. They all forget, for a few slippery minutes, that they're halfway across the world from where they began. The servants continue to whisper, not mockingly, almost respectfully. You receive a small carved elephant with your morning tea. It has a tiny tub strapped to its back. Later, on a visit to the market, a vendor tries to sell you a folding chair. You smile and say, close, but I prefer bathtubs. He squints, then offers to build you one from teak and canvas. Lightweight. Custom. You consider it. Maybe Winifred could use a sister. As the weeks pass, you find your rhythm, morning tea, letters, soaking. Sometimes in the shade. Sometimes beneath the stars. You watch geckos on the ceiling. Fireflies in the dusk. Your friend seems lighter too, her edges softened by rose oil and eucalyptus. It isn't a perfect place. There are awkward silences at dinner. Political mutterings in the distance. But for now, your water ritual remains untouched. Undisturbed. Yours. And when it's time to leave, bags packed, hugs exchanged, promises made, you unfold Winifred one last time. A final soak under a sky so wide it feels like you could float right out of it. Then, like always, Winifred folds. You step onto the ship cleaner, calmer, and with a teak carving in your coat pocket. You're not sure where your next bath will be, but you're sure you'll find one. Back home, the rain smells like soot again. The kind of rain that doesn't cleanse, it just rearranges the dirt on your boots and leaves a sad, grey line on the hem of your travelling skirts. You step off the carriage, Winifred under one arm, and your maid, long-suffering and slightly sunburned, trudges behind you with the rest. Your mother peers through the curtain. You've returned from India tanned, smug, and fully convinced that everyone in your neighbourhood is underbathed. And perhaps they are. But before you can unpack the teak carving or your new spices, reality returns in the form of a single phrase: the staff is restless. Apparently, while you were overseas enjoying hibiscus foot soaks, your household maid quit. Something about too many baths and not enough gratitude. You can't blame her, really. That tub isn't just a novelty, it's work. And that's what this chapter's about, isn't it? Behind every elegant soak, there's a trail of damp towels, heavy kettles, and someone else's aching arms. Mainstream historical fact: in Victorian households, it was the servants, usually female domestic workers, who carried water, heated it, filled the tubs, and emptied them by hand. This was a physically demanding task, often repeated multiple times a day if the lady of the house insisted on personal hygiene beyond the norm. Bathing, for the upper class, was never a solo act, it was a team effort. And in your case, it's always been Winifred and a woman with sore wrists. You hire a new maid. She's young, quiet, and built like she could carry a sideboard up a flight of stairs. Perfect. The training begins immediately. You show her how to unfold Winifred gently, how not to scald her hands when pouring in the second kettle, and the precise ratio of lavender to rose petals for a post-travel soak. She says nothing, but her eyebrow does a little dance. The bath itself is as glorious as ever. You sink into it with the joy of someone who has tamed the jungle and come home victorious. But afterward, as your maid struggles to drain the water out into the gutter, you notice the strain in her hands. And suddenly, The steam doesn't feel quite so innocent. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some foldable bathtubs came with modesty tents, canvas enclosures that allowed women to bathe privately even in shared quarters or outdoors. But these often required another person to secure and dismantle, reinforcing the strange blend of independence and dependence baked into the experience. You could bathe wherever, as long as someone else helped you. You start to feel it, the contradiction. You pride yourself on self-care, on elegant rituals, on being the cleanest woman in your postcode. But the truth is, you've outsourced the hardest part. Always have. She never complains, your maid. She even gets faster at wringing out the towels and balancing the folded tub on one hip. But one morning, as you're choosing between violet and sandalwood soaps, she winces and drops the kettle. Water splashes over the hearth, sizzling. You both freeze. "I'll get another," she mutters. You nod, but something has shifted. Historians still argue whether Victorian women were victims of their social constraints or active participants in maintaining the very hierarchies that confined them. For every step forward in female independence, like the right to travel or bathe freely, there was often a corresponding reinforcement of class lines. Cleanliness, in this context, becomes not just a virtue, but a luxury, purchased at someone else's physical cost. You don't cancel your baths. Of course not. But you make changes. You start filling the first kettle yourself. You carry towels occasionally. You even try folding Winifred once, pinching your thumb in the hinge and shouting words not fit for polite company. The maid snorts. It's the closest thing to friendship you've shared. And still, you buy a new soap. French. Smells like crushed dreams and lilies. Your friends drop by more often. They want to hear about India, of course, but really, they want to see the teak accessories and test the imported salts. You let them. And your maid hovers just beyond the doorway, refilling, draining, folding. Always there. Always invisible. One guest brings her own servant, a thin girl who looks like she hasn't slept in a week. The girl spills water on your parlor rug and is scolded twice. You lock eyes with her across the tub's canvas lip. For a moment, you imagine she's the one bathing, and you're the one holding the kettle. It changes nothing. But it stays with you. You start tipping more generously. You offer tea after bath duty. Tiny acts. Imperfect ones. But in this house, they're a revolution. It doesn't make you a hero. It makes you slightly more bearable. There's a quote your friend sent you in a letter, something she heard in Calcutta. Even the moon leaves footprints in the river. You think about that every time the bathwater drains. What footprints are you leaving? Eventually, your maid grows faster than you. Anticipates your bath moods. Times the heat perfectly. She never calls Winifred by name, but once, you hear her mutter, "There you are, you stubborn thing," while trying to fold it into its canvas wrap. You don't laugh aloud, but you smile. One night, as you soak by candlelight, listening to the soft sounds of rain against the window pane, you close your eyes and picture her, your maid, slipping into her own bath once the house is quiet. Using the leftover water. Maybe even a pinch of that sandalwood soap you accidentally left out. You hope she does. You want her to. Because maybe this whole era, the class divides, the rigid rules, the endless folding and draining, won't last forever. Maybe someday, everyone will have a bath of their own. No canvas. No permission. No extra hands required. But until then, there's Winifred. And the women who make her possible. It begins with a whisper. No, not a scandal, though that's never far from reach in Victorian drawing rooms, but an advertisement. Tucked neatly inside the Queen magazine, somewhere between an article on summer hats and a recipe for aspic. The travelling lady's hygiene companion, a discreet innovation for the discerning voyager. You sit bolt upright in your reading chair, nearly spilling tea onto your cat, who is not impressed. The illustration shows something suspiciously familiar: canvas, leather, curved metal edges. It's a portable bathtub, but sleeker. Less military campaign, more boudoir elegance. Winifred, meet your competition. As you read, you realize you are no longer alone. That luxurious, smug feeling of owning the only collapsible tub on your train car, your guest suite, your jungle tent. Gone. You, my friend, are now on trend. Mainstream historical fact: by the late 19th century, innovations in travel gear and hygiene were booming, especially for wealthier women. The market saw a sharp increase in feminine toiletry kits, travel-sized bidets, folding sinks, and, yes, portable bathtubs. Entire catalogues emerged dedicated to the traveling gentlewoman, complete with diagrams, testimonials, and increasingly ornate designs. And what a moment it is. You've gone from eccentric to fashionable in just under a decade. That tub you used to hide behind the luggage now sits proudly on display at your garden parties. Oh, that old thing, you say airily, as guests gawk. It's French. You know how they are about bathing. But the options have exploded. A friend sends you a clipping about a collapsible zinc bath that doubles as a steamer trunk. Another swears by a boiling pail with pour spout that fits discreetly inside a hatbox. Someone mentions a porcelain-lined case that plays La Traviata when opened, though that might be an exaggeration. Quirky tidbit time. One popular invention in the 1890s was a dressing and bathing tent, a compact canvas enclosure marketed to wealthy women traveling to the seaside. Inside was a modesty curtain, a foot bath, and sometimes a gas lamp for heat. Some even included hidden compartments for perfume and a mirror panel that folded out like a magician's trick box. The Victorians were not minimalist. You start a scrapbook. You begin cutting out ads, sketching designs, rating your friends' tubs by soak depth and leak resistance. One of your entries simply reads, "Lady GS folds easily, but has an unfortunate floral pattern like drowning in grandmother's wallpaper." You're not alone in this obsession. You attend a demonstration at Harrods. A tall woman in violet satin shows a crowd of well-dressed ladies how her latest model unfolds in 12 seconds flat. The crowd gasps when she adds, "It holds heat for 4 hours, thanks to this wool-lined cover." Your maid leans over and whispers, "Maybe this one won't bite my thumb." You pat her hand. "But will it love me like Winifred?" She doesn't answer. Historians still argue whether these consumer products truly improved women's independence or simply commodified their fears. Some scholars claim the rise of hygiene gadgets empowered women to take control of their bodies and spaces, even while traveling. Others point out that these items were wildly expensive, accessible only to the elite, and often reinforced social competition. Bathtubs became status symbols. Hygiene became a performance. And you're somewhere in between. You still love Winifred. But you begin experimenting. You rent a Turkish bath for one in Bath. You try a new model with curved wooden slats that dig into your back like judgmental fingers. You almost fall for a German design until you realize the drain empties directly onto the floor. You attend a soiree where Lady Montcliffe demonstrates her bathe-in-bed contraption. It's a disaster. Her sheets are ruined. Her pride drowns. But your scrapbook grows. One night, you hold a tub tasting. Yes, like wine. You invite 6 friends and ask them to bring their preferred portable bath. The parlor fills with more canvas, zinc, and brass than an army encampment. You light candles, play Chopin, serve chilled cordial. And then, one by one, you all soak. Not together. Good heavens. You rotate. Each woman gets 10 minutes. She emerges flushed, steamy, and ready to critique. There are arguments. One guest insists the Bavarian model is too shallow. Another claims the French version smells faintly of onions. Your maid watches the proceedings with a face that could grind flour. Later, after the final tub is drained and everyone's gone home slightly pruny, you ask her which was her favorite. She shrugs. Whichever one folds fastest. Touché. You write that in the scrapbook. The catalogues keep coming. Prices rise. Reviews are published. One even features a lady adventurer of the Nile recommending a folding copper bath that allegedly doubles as a makeshift boat. You're skeptical, but impressed. And then comes the tipping point. You receive an invitation to exhibit Winifred. A local women's club is hosting a domestic inventions exposition. They've heard you have a most dignified travel tub, and would you be willing to present it? You hesitate. Winifred has always been personal. Private. Like showing your diary. Or your underwear drawer. But you agree. Because something's changing, and you want to be part of it. You polish Winifred. Replace the straps. Tuck a sprig of lavender under the flap. On exhibition day, she gleams under gaslight like a museum relic. Children peek over the rope barrier. Women point. A gentleman with a monocle asks if it can seat two. You don't dignify that with an answer. As the evening ends, a young woman approaches you. She's traveling to Cairo next month. Nervous. Unsure. But determined. She asks if Winifred is hard to carry. If it leaks. If you've ever regretted her. You shake your head. She's followed me across oceans, you say. Never once let me down. The young woman smiles. Then she opens her notebook and takes notes. You wonder if, someday, she'll host her own tub tasting. By now, your bathtub has outlived 3 kettles, 2 maids, and at least 1 friendship. She, Winifred, of course, has survived salt air, camel rides, and a full week in a Paris customs hold. You've patched her canvas twice and re-oiled her hinges after a particularly damp spring in Cornwall. She no longer folds quite as crisply as she used to, but then again, neither do you. Still, tonight, you unfold her with the same reverence you did when she was new. Because tonight's bath is ceremonial. Your niece, age 16 and fully feral, is coming with you to Vienna next week, and you're going to teach her the way of the travel soak. She's dubious, naturally. Prefers cold showers, if you can imagine. Eats pickled radishes. Believes hats are optional. You decide to start gently. Every woman must choose her own bath, you say as you light the lanterns. She looks unconvinced. You invite her to carry the second kettle. She sloshes it. Your maid winces. Progress is slow. Mainstream historical fact. By the 1890s, many upper-class young women began traveling without chaperones for the first time, especially across Europe. Study tours, language immersion, and cultural finishing trips became popular among the elite. While these journeys symbolized newfound freedoms, they also required intense preparation, especially for hygiene. Manuals and etiquette guides emphasized that personal cleanliness, even abroad, reflected one's class and breeding. You remember your first trip. The nerves. The excitement. The dread of being mistaken for uncouth or, worse, continental. You're trying not to pass all that anxiety onto your niece, but old habits die hard. She watches as you lower yourself into the warm water, your hair pinned up, steam curling around your ears. The window is cracked. The street lamps outside buzz faintly. It is quiet enough to hear your own sigh. And then, tentatively, she asks, "Do you really take this thing everywhere?" You nod. "Even to the Alps?" She squints. "Why?" 100 answers rise. Because sweat never sleeps. Because strange inns have stranger plumbing. Because bathing is a revolution disguised as a ritual. But instead, you shrug. Because it makes me feel like myself. She sits on the stool beside you, her knees bumping the soap tin. You hand her a sponge. She wrinkles her nose. but dabs your shoulder. Quirky tidbit alert. Some late Victorian ladies developed bathtub dueling, not as violent as it sounds. Essentially, they compared their travel tub's merits by writing satirical letters to each other and publishing them in niche lifestyle magazines. One infamous exchange involved two duchesses fighting over whose tub had better heat retention, culminating in a limerick that ended with, "But mine's the one in the Louvre, you see, next to Napoleon's tea." You once wrote a poem about Winifred. It rhymed scald with bald. It was not your best work. Back in the present, your niece is asking about soap preferences. This is promising. You walk her through the options: musk, rose, bergamot, tar. She sniffs each one like a perfumer and declares the lavender to grandmother. You don't take it personally. Much. As you towel off, she starts folding the tub. Badly. Backwards. There's a small disaster involving the footrest. You laugh. She scowls. Then she laughs too. Historians still argue whether these domestic rituals, bathing, dressing, grooming, were acts of conformity or rebellion. Were women reinforcing their roles as ornamental beings? Or were they carving out private power in a world that gave them so little space? With portable bathtubs, this debate becomes even more complicated. Is the woman bathing in the jungle truly liberated, or just recreating her parlor abroad? You lean toward the former. But you've lived enough to know it's not simple. A week later, you arrive in Vienna with your niece, 2 overstuffed trunks, and 1 very weary maid. You check into your pension, unpack the essentials, and unfurl Winifred. Your niece watches silently, then mutters, "She's bigger than I thought." She grows on you, you reply. And because it's been a long day, you let your niece bathe first. She disappears behind the screen, and a few minutes later, you hear water splash, a muffled "oh," and then, surprisingly, a hum. She emerges pink-cheeked, hair damp, towel tucked under one arm. "Okay," she says. "I get it now." Victory. The next day, you find a scrap of paper on the dressing table. It's a sketch, her rough drawing of a foldable bathtub shaped more like a chaise, with little feet and what appears to be a bookrest. At the bottom, she's written, "Patent pending." You don't say a word. You just tuck it into your scrapbook, next to the ad for the foot-warming soak mat. Because that's what you've really passed down, isn't it? Not just the canvas and brass. Not just a habit. But a tiny, absurd act of power. A ritual of autonomy. 1 warm bath at a time. Winifred doesn't come to the funeral. You considered it, briefly. Not for show, but for comfort. A strange, private nod to the ritual that got you through so many years, so many places. But in the end, she stays folded in the linen cupboard, under the extra shawls and a box of old postcards. Besides, your niece insists on drawing the bath for you. A real one. Cast iron, claw-footed, filled with rosemary and lemon peel. The water smells like memory. She adds 2 kettles of hot water, carefully, without splashing. You think, she's learned the pour. You soak. Not because you're grieving, though you are, but because this is how you think best. This is how you breathe. Mainstream historical fact: by the turn of the century, the obsession with personal hygiene evolved even further. Indoor plumbing reached more and more upper-middle-class homes. Permanent bathtubs became a staple of modern design. The ritual of bathing became less about survival or travel and more about wellness, even luxury. Spa culture blossomed. Self-care, though not yet called that, entered the domestic vocabulary. Still, you've never loved fixed tubs the same way. They're too cold. Too rooted. You think about the map on your study wall. The little pins in all the cities you've unfolded: Winifred, Edinburgh, Alexandria, Prague, Bombay. You even took her to Venice, where the hotel staff mistook her for a musical instrument and tried to tune her. And now, here you are, in your own house, sitting in a tub that can't be packed away. You feel like a plant in a too tight pot. After the bath, your niece helps you dry your hair. She insists on brushing it out, 100 strokes like a governess from a novel. Then she wraps it up in a loose bun and hands you your robe. I think she'd be proud, she says quietly. You don't have to ask who. Quirky tidbit. Some late Victorian ladies requested that their travel bathtubs be buried with them or at least repurposed as planters in their gardens. There's one grave in Devon marked with an iron plaque that reads, "Here lies Eleanor H., who bathed on 4 continents and never caught a cold." You secretly hope for something similar. Maybe your niece will turn Winifred into a reading chair. Or a shrine. Or just use her. One day, in the distant future, she'll tell someone, "My aunt had this ridiculous foldable bathtub, and she insisted it was a symbol of freedom." Historians still argue whether portable hygiene items truly shaped feminist agency, or merely mirrored shifting class anxieties. One camp says these objects gave women mobility and dignity on their own terms. The other counters that they simply created new rules and expectations for how a proper woman must live even in the wild. But either way, they mattered. And as you sit on the porch that evening, sipping tea, you feel the slow unraveling of a life lived with hot water and canvas and a little steel latch that never quite closes right. The world is quieter now, but somehow still moving. You hear it in your niece's voice as she plans her next trip to Iceland, or Morocco, or maybe just to Brighton for a weekend. She's packing light, she says, but not too light. "Do you want me to take her?" she asks. You smile. "I think she's ready." She folds Winifred gently, with the same reverence you once did. You can see she's added a label to the leather strap, "Property of H.W. and M.H., not for stew." You don't ask. There's a breeze now. The sun dips low. Somewhere, a kettle whistles. And in that moment, you realize, you don't have to go with Winifred anymore. Because she will go on. Somewhere out there, beneath foreign stars, your little traveling bathtub will unfold again. The water will be warm. The woman will be strong. And the journey will begin. So now, you let the story soften. Your fingers uncurl. Your shoulders settle deeper into the pillows. Your mind stretches out like a cat in a patch of sunlight. No more trains to catch. No more boiling kettles or folding canvas. Just stillness. You imagine the quiet ripples of warm water around your ankles. The way steam rises like slow dancing ghosts. The scent of lavender drifting upward, then fading into nothing. The world feels a little older now, but it's also gentler. You think of all the women who folded their little bathtubs and took them into jungles, deserts, drafty manor houses, and rickety train compartments. Not because it was fashionable, but because it meant something. It meant, I am allowed to be clean. I am allowed to rest. I am allowed to take up space even here. Even now, somewhere across time, someone is filling a basin, pouring hot water, letting the stress of the day dissolve into soap and silence. And maybe that someone is you. So breathe. Let the images slip away. Let the canvas close. Let the latch click. And as the lights dim, let your eyes do the same. You've traveled far tonight, my friend. Now it's time to rest. Sleep well.